We welcome you all to our morning Bible study. It's a very exciting passage we're going to look at now about Christ's victory over death. But before that, we'll go on from verse 54 of 15th chapter of 1Corinthians. And just for continuity's sake, we'll look at verse 53 also, where the Apostle Paul writes, "For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality." Perishable is the physical body we have right now. One day it will go to dust or ashes or water, it will decay, but it must clothe itself with the imperishable, and that is the spiritual body. This body is mortal, whereas the resurrected body will be immortal. 2 Timothy chapter 1, second part of verse 9 and verse 10 is written, "For Jesus destroyed death and brought life and immortality to light through the gospel." Gospel is good news. Good news is that we're going to have a spiritual body. It will be like the body of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, last time someone asked this question about the kind of body we're going to have. And I had mentioned that when Jesus appeared to the disciples, he passed through closed doors, locked doors. And was it a body of flesh and blood? We read earlier in the passage 50th verse of this chapter, that flesh and blood will not inherit God's kingdom. There's no blood in heaven when you go to heaven, our body I'm talking about. Whereas actually I looked at it, the passage in the book of Luke. It says about how when Christ entered through locked doors and appeared to the disciples, and he showed them his body, and he says, "This body, look at my body, touch my body. It's flesh and body, flesh and bones." It's not like a ghost. Ghost means spirit, actually. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, but I have flesh and bones. So actually, he had flesh and bones, and he went through closed doors. The fact is, when he appeared to disciples, at various people, he appeared in different forms. Different forms. Mark 16, chapter verse 12 says he appeared in a different form. That's why they couldn't recognize him, many of them. Even Mary Magdalene, only when he said Mary, she says Rabboni. She didn't recognize him. And therefore, we're going to look at a passage where Jesus appears to the disciples in flesh and bones and came through locked doors. This happened actually after he appeared to the two people on the road to Emmaus. Two people encountered him on the road to Emmaus, or he encountered them. Then when they recognized him, they go back to Jerusalem and report to the apostles, 11 apostles, what had happened. We pick up the story in the book of Luke, 24th chapter, 36 to 45. I'm going to request Sushma to read it. Luke 24, 36 to 45.
Luke chapter 24, verses 36 to 45. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I, myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet, and while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. He said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." When he opened their minds, Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures.
It's very obvious that he had flesh and bones, and it doesn't talk about blood. But whatever it is, the fact is we're going to have like him. And earlier I also shared about how different form he appeared, and what John saw of Jesus in the book of Revelation is completely different form that he ever imagined or thought of before. Maybe you could read that also, Sushma. Revelation chapter 1, 12 to 16. This is what Jesus, how it appeared to John in the Revelation, book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 1, 12 to 16. A very fascinating, spectacular picture of Jesus as John saw.
Revelation chapter 1, verses 12 to 16. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet and with a golden sash around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun shining in all its brilliance.
A completely different picture that you can ever imagine about Jesus. He's not in a manger. He's not even on a cross today. He's in glory. And that's what John saw Jesus. So he appeared in different forms. So what kind of body we're going to have, we don't know. But we will be like Jesus. We shall see him as he is. We shall be like him. In 1 John chapter 3, verse 1 to 3 is written. With this background, let's go to the 54th verse. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. This is actually a quotation from the Old Testament. When the prophet Isaiah prophesied in Isaiah chapter 25, 7 and 8, on this mount he will destroy the show that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. Isaiah prophesied how in this mountain he will destroy the show that enfolds all peoples. What mountain was that? This 25th chapter of Isaiah 7 8. 24th chapter of Isaiah, verse 23, talks about this mountain being Zion, Mount Zion. Earlier we looked at other passages where it talks about everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. For on Mount Zion and Jerusalem there will be deliverance. That is Joel chapter 2, verse 32. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. It's also quoted by Paul in Romans 10:13. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be deliverance. Again, Obadiah prophesied. Obadiah verse 17 and 18 says, on this mountain, on Mount Zion, there will be deliverance forever for Jacob and for Joseph, Abraham, for every one of us, where he will destroy death and there will be deliverance on the Mount of Zion. Mount Jerusalem and the cross of the Lord Jesus Christ. For Mount Zion there shall be deliverance, it will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess its inheritance. The house of Jacob will be fire. So, Zion represents the cross of Calvary. Now, sometimes people get confused about Calvary and Golgotha. What is Calvary? Cross of Calvary, cross of Golgotha. Golgotha is Aramaic and Calvary is Latin. Same thing, it means the same. It means the place of the skull. Now, I want to take you the background to this particular Mount Zion. You know, the time when Abraham was in Beersheba, Beersheba is southern tip of Israel. Dan in the north, Beersheba in the south. Somewhere deep south. And that's when Lord told him, take your son, your one son whom you love, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I'll show you in the region of Moriah. He was southern part of Israel. God told him, take Isaac, go to the region of Moriah and sacrifice him there on one of the mountains I will show you. Why all the way to Moriah? Moriah actually was the place later on where the city of David was built. 2 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1 talks about how on Mount Moriah was built the city of David. So God brought Abraham all the way from Beersheba to Moriah, and he told him, you must sacrifice your son Isaac on one of the mountains I will show you. That mountain was Zion. All the way God brought him from Beersheba. He could have sacrificed him anywhere, isn't it? Anywhere he could have sacrificed Isaac if God wanted him to sacrifice. but brought him to Moriah, in the region of Moriah, where the city of David was built in Jerusalem, and nearby was Zion, and God showed him that mountain. Now, as Abraham was willing to offer his one son Isaac as a sacrifice, God provided for him a ram, a substitute, which horn was caught the thickest. And then Abraham realized that God is not going to make him sacrifice his son Isaac. He gave him a substitute. Then he says, Jehovah Jireh, my provider. And the Lord told Abraham, because he did not hesitate to offer one son Isaac whom you love, I am going to give you children like the stars in the universe. Look up and see. We'll have children like the stars in the universe. And in the 22nd chapter of Genesis, verse 14, Abraham says, Jehovah Jireh, my provider. And then the writer of the book of Genesis to Deuteronomy was actually Moses, and he wrote it 450 years later. He wrote that, where he says, even to this day it is said, on this mountain it shall be provided. Even to this day, when Abraham was ready to offer Isaac a sacrifice, he said, Jehovah Jireh, my provider, he provides for my needs, even for a substitute for Isaac. And after 430 years, when Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament, he writes, even to this day, it is said, on this mountain it shall be provided. What is that mountain? Zion. What is provided? Salvation for the world and children for Abraham like the stars in the universe. Today, you and me are actually Abraham's children. If you look at Galatians 3:16, we read, the promise is spoken to Abraham and to his seed. Scriptures don't say and to seeds, meaning many people, but and to his seed, meaning one person who is Christ. Verse 29. If you belong to Christ, you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So all the believers of this world who believe in Jesus have now become Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So in a way, we are Abraham's children today. Yeah, so Isaiah prophesied about Mount Zion. On this mountain, he will destroy the show that enfolds all peoples. She that covers all nations, swallow up death forever. That is what is quoted now by Paul in the New Testament, to the Corinthians. Death has been swallowed up in victory. He's quoting actually 2 prophets. One is quoting from Isaiah. And as I said earlier, Abraham saw Mount Zion, and Jesus spoke about that and said he rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. What he saw was actually Mount Zion, and God must have given him a vision, not necessarily a physical vision, visual vision, but an understanding that through this work of Christ on Calvary, on Golgotha, on Zion, he have children like the stars in the universe. Then again, the Apostle Paul is quoting the prophet Hosea. And Hosea, by the way, was ministering the same time as Isaiah. Isaiah was prophesying in Jerusalem. Hosea was prophesying in Israel, northern kingdom, in Samaria. And those are the 2 kingdoms. Israel in the north and Judea in the south. Same time, around 720 BC. And through Hosea, the Lord spoke to his people. So I'm going to read Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. Hosea 13, 14. 13th chapter, verse 14.
Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, are your plagues? Where, O grave, is your destruction? I will have no compassion.
Actually, that time, there were 12 tribes, we all know. And 10 tribes are very prosperous in Israel. 2 tribes are very not in good shape, Ephraim and Manasseh. And the Lord is lamenting over that disobedience. And when Hosea prophesied, so also Micah was, Amos was prophesying, but they didn't listen. And the land was overrun by the Assyrians. But then Lord spoke about the ultimate redemption through Christ, both through Isaiah and through Hosea. Because he wanted to tell them about the fact they wanted they were going to be ransomed from the power of the grave. In fact, he writes to them and says, Hosea writes, I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. Talk about work of Christ on the cross. So here is the fulfillment. Paul writing about how through the cross we've been ransomed, we belong to Jesus. And therefore, that prophecy had been fulfilled today. And one day when the perishable is to the imperishable, this saying will come true. That's when Christ comes the second time, be raised to life, will have a new body, an imperishable body, and an immortal body. We will live forever in heaven, where there's no death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain. He destroyed death on the cross. This is the one upon the power of death on the cross. And therefore, when you go to heaven, it says in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 4, there's no death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain. Same chapter, Revelation, 21st chapter, verse 27, it says, nothing impure will ever enter that heaven. Sometimes people wonder, that when at one time in heaven, there was Satan, not as Satan, but as a guardian cherub. He rebelled against God and was banished from heaven onto earth. So people wonder, when we go to heaven after resurrection, will there be again a possibility that there is sin there and he is thrown down? The devil is thrown down. He won't be there. Nothing impure ever enter that place. There's no question of sin after that. And therefore, that's the good news for us. We will be transformed. We'll be like Jesus. And no death, no mourning, no crying, no pain. Having said that, in the first part of that chapter is written about how when you go to heaven, Lord will wipe away every tear. Why should there be tears? Why should wipe away every tear? There'll be tears to be wiped away. Why? He probably will look at people whom he wanted them to be saved, but are not saved. They're lost. He'll shed a tear for them. But then God will wipe away that tear also. So ultimately, no death, no mourning, no crying, no pain. Because Christ destroyed death on the cross. Again, could you read Hebrews chapter 2, Sushma? Chapter 2 of Hebrews, verses 14 and 15.
Hebrews 2:14 and 15. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death.
While living in this world itself, we are set free from the fear of death. And ultimately, death will be destroyed on the cross. Destroyed after the perishable becomes clothed with the imperishable, mortal with the immortality. That's a good news for all of us. That's why we have to share this good news. And last part of this chapter is our mandate to be faithful to this gospel and to tell people there's victory over death. One more verse I'll do before we close, and I'll do the last 2 verses on Wednesday. Having spoken about victory over death, death is ultimate victory. Whereof death is your sting, victory, whereof death is your sting. Verse 56 is written, the sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. The sting of the death strikes us because of sin. Sting of death is sin. There is sin. Because of sin, death strikes us, it stings us. And the power of sin is the law. If there was no law, there's no breaking of the law. There's a law, we break it, and we realize we are sinners. There's no law, there's no power. There's no sin at all. There's no breakage, there's no transgression. There's a law, we break the law, and therefore we become sinners. And because we are sinners, death strikes us. The sting of death is sin. It's like, supposing I'm driving a car and going at night in the road. Then I come to a no entry sign in the road. And late night, nobody's there, no policeman is there. And I drive through that road. But I still feel guilty about it. I feel bad. I'm breaking a law. Why? There's a no entry board at the entrance. And I'm passing through the no entry board. So I feel I've done something wrong. I can justify myself by saying, oh, no one is there. Policeman is not there. The traffic is not there. Nobody is there. Why should I wait? And why should I go by another route? I can cross no entry sign. But then because the no entry sign is there, I feel bad about it. As I feel I'm doing something wrong. If there's no entry sign and I go to the road, they won't feel any bad about it. So in other words, there's a law, we break the law and we are transgressors. What's been a transgressors? Crossing the boundary, crossing the limits. So the power of sin, the law, that's why the law never saved anybody. The law only brought death. The law only brought death. Now we go look at one passage in the Bible about the law that did not bring life, brought death only. Sushma will read 2 Corinthians chapter 3 from verse 9 we can read. I'll just tell you the exact passage. 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and I'll tell you from which passage read from. Verse 7 onwards.
2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 7 onwards.
Until verse 10, yeah.
Now if the ministry that brought death, which was engraved in letters on stone, came with glory, so that the Israelites could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of its glory, fading though it was, will not the ministry of the Spirit be even more glorious? If the ministry that condemns men is glorious, how much more glorious is the ministry that brings righteousness? For what was glorious has no glory now in comparison with the surpassing glory. And if
from verse 7 and verse 9, we realize that ministry of the law of Moses only brought death. It did not bring life. Look at verse 7. Means that brought death, which was engraved in letters of stone, came with glory. About the ministry that condemns men, that is verse 9. So the law of Moses brought death, separation from God, and brought condemnation. Because there's a law. And we break the law. And the ministry that brings glory is the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. How much more glorious that is. When God gave the 10 commandments to Moses, his face was radiating, full of glory. But that ministry only brought death. If that came with glory, how much more glorious the ministry that brings righteousness. So when we share the gospel to people, we bring righteousness to them. So going back, the law brought death. Power of sin is the law. And the sting of death is sin. And because we are sinners, death strikes us. And all of us die. It's written in the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, verse 27. It's given for all people to die to face judgment. All people are supposed to die one day and face judgment, unless, of course, we're going to be raptured when it comes the second time. Just as man is destined, all men are destined to die once and face judgment. We're all destined to die once and face judgment. But then for Christians, judgment is degrees of rewards. For other people, condemnation. There's no Christ in you, you're not going to heaven. But then if we're going to come a second time and we are alive at that time, we won't die, we'll be raptured. But the unlikely to happen in our lifetime. It's given for all people to die once and face judgment. Only one life, one death, and one resurrection. So the law is there, They break the law, they become sinners. Power of sin, the law, and the sting of death is sin. But next verse says, thanks be to God who gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. I'm going to focus on that on Wednesday. The entire session is about victory over death. I'm going to focus on death. And I've often spoken on that on Zoom meetings in the evenings. But since the topic here is victory over death, thanks be to God, victory, we're going to talk about all aspects of that victory and our responsibility to other people because of Christ's victory over death. Because death is something that is holding a lot of people in bondage. And God spoke long time ago about, I will ransom them from death. Written in the power of the grave, Hosea 13:14. Psalm 68 verse 20. Our God is a God who saves. From the sovereign Lord comes escape from death. People don't know that. We know that. Let's first understand victory over death. The entire next verse is going to be only one verse, 56th verse. And then the following Friday, we'll talk about our responsibility, our mandate, how we are called to share the gospel to all people because of Christ's victory over death. Very exciting, these two verses, two passages, and we'll finish with the 15th chapter this week. And we'll go on, 15th chapter this week, and next week we'll do 16th chapter, which is basically greetings and very ending of Paul's letter. Not so much theology there is in it, but here's a lot of theology. God bless you all, and we'll go on time of question answers and maybe after prayer.